Well, hi there. Welcome back to the Drawing Database. Professor Marc here. Today we're going to spend 15 minutes with the drawings of Berthe Morisot, French painter, female French painter, born in 1841 and died in 1895. Far too young, I believe, in Paris. So we're going to look at Berthe Morisot's paintings, and she was a contemporary of Manet and Monet and Degas and Mary Cassatt and artists, Lautrec and artists in that circle of impressionists who looked towards modern life, contemporary life at that time, and looked to loosen up their formal painting structure as well as study the science of color and observational color within their oeuvre of drawing and certainly painting. So we take a look at the first drawing here by Morisot of a pastel drawing in also probably pastel chalk or also charcoal. Notice the almost effortless looseness that so many people try to emulate, probably far too early in their drawing education before they get there. So the structure is there, the head structure, the wonderful anatomy coming through in the three-dimensionality into the forms, the lovely use of color of the chalk, these subtle blending in the slight coarse shadow, the abnormally light ivory kind of skin of the model of the child, and then the wonderful perspective going on. This is a tour de force in minimal sketching and drawing, and quite frankly a lovely beginning way to open up to Morisot in her very painterly, sketchy quality here. Here we see a lovely, what's probably a Japanese woman. The Impressionists were certainly enamored with Japanese flat-style woodcut prints of that era in the middle to late 19th century, and this might be a study of a lovely young Japanese woman in some type of clothing dress. Notice the most of the use of the pencil tip here in a very quick kind of scratchy sketch, very loose but structured and controlled. The woman leans over a little bit, so we have graphite heightened in some what looks like to be perhaps crayon or wax pencil at this point in time. I can't quite tell for sure. I don't think it, just the way it sits on the surface, it looks like chalk pastel, but I could be wrong. But again, it's a lovely, very almost effortless, minimal in terms of detail study of a young woman, and love the mixing of blue hair with the yellow hints and a little bit of the graphite to give a darker toned brunette or black feeling, raven haired kind of feeling to this lovely model. Another lovely portrait of a woman in slight three-quarter or mostly profile. Notice the head structure that Morisot is pulling out here. So we have the lovely mandible in through here, side plane of the head, the zygomatic arc of the cheekbone coming down to the jaw. Notice the lovely execution of the eye line, the nose line. Those seem to be slightly out of place. Maybe there's asymmetry certainly in the model, and then the rest of the structure lines up really nicely. So the underlying structure is there, and the way to learn that, those of you that are watching this video and that are passionate about drawing and art history, is to practice structure underneath the model exclusively, without a model or without a observational aspect in front of you. So you get really good structure into your system, and it takes time over and over and over again, and practice this model until you can draw it from out of your head from memory, and that's when you've learned to draw really well, when you can see it underneath, because there's the structure right there underneath, and then we see the lovely pastel rendering, some blending going on, probably with a finger or a stump, and then layering on top darker tonalities, and then mixing in some lovely subtle tonality through here, and quite nice painterly for one of her studies. Image of a child, quick study, probably in a sketchbook. Same kind of techniques that we're used to seeing from Morisot. The structure is there, constant, excellent structure in the head coming through, right in through there. And we also see just the lovely use of applied color very quickly sketched, kind of a reflection down at the bottom, perhaps, maybe in a mirror of some sort underneath, or maybe that was just folded there. I don't necessarily know. And then lovely wisps of slight color in this study. I'll get this out of the way for a moment, and you can see the character coming through. And notice how she uses kind of really the tone of the paper in some of these light shadow areas. Same thing here, that she leaves relatively untouched or slightly just blended. This is a knockout study, isn't it? It reminds you also of her contemporary and I believe friend Mary Cassatt. Mary Cassatt was American-born and worked and lived in France and in Paris especially. And this has a little bit more time and height and realism. So the Impressionists were also, in my opinion, a certain kind of a realist with their lighter, more brushy brushstroke and loosening up and almost a blurring of the image, but they really zeroed in on contemporary life. We see the undercut of the breasts through here, the structure coming through and over. So the structure's there, the strong academic training is there, and then the genius of the school, if you will, of Impressionism, a loose school of intellectuals and artists to come along and change the pattern of what was then sort of bourgeois sort of classicism and a kind of romantic flavor of myth and history, and a kind of I would argue a static quality in terms of content. And there's no doubt that Bouguereau was an excellent draftsman, first-rate draftsman, and painter. But what we see in Morisot's image is a direct portrait from a living, breathing young woman of that particular time. And so what we see in the content of these artists is finally an opening up to what was around them within their own location, geography, and within their own time, which is very important. So the almost effortless use of some applied color, certainly more blended with perhaps a brush, perhaps with the fingers in through here, and a really lovely gestural quality within the head, and also the skin tones and the captivating eyes. Just a tour de force here. You can almost see Malay's influence in here, another French artist that we've looked at prior, in his quality of the peasant. Perhaps it's in the stylings of the kind of the outdoor for farm dressing at that point in time. Still a long skirt, maybe milking a cow. We see it, maybe, or a goat in through here, and some kind of outdoor activity. We see sepia tones, and we see look at the underneath gesture in the drawing that's not necessarily there, but we see the flow and the rhythm of that, and then the variety of line weights to signify an overhead kind of lining in the sun with darks underneath. We see the shadows as she's mostly in shadow. So it's a very calligraphic kind of drawing with some very quick, wispy, gestural undertones within the shadows, and very sketchy and very loose and excellent. A little bit different, less finished here than what we've seen from Cassatt earlier, but we see graphite, probably Layan or charcoal or gray kind of chalk. Lovely control, but again, lighter, looser, a little bit looser in the anatomy, but no less structured. It's just paring down and really signifying also post-impressionism with Gauguin, Degas, Seurat, and Pissarro and others. As well as Fauvism and Matisse, and there's just a loosening on the gestural quality of the image, a tour de force, and beautiful, beautiful tightening study here in the neck and also the head. And lastly, a very impressionistic, almost full figure in color, and we see her in an outdoor environment, the model here, and a very difficult backlit model where the sun is coming from above and slightly behind her. And so the reason why we know that, we see her in full shadow and mostly in shadow shape here with a little bit of sun hitting the white sort of formal dress in through here, kind of summer outdoor, very formal kind of maybe bourgeois kind of dress. And we see certainly we see color that we see in the background here, just to heighten the idea, but very quick kind of sketch within the gesture. And what I love about, again, is the suggestivity, if you will, of the facial features when structure is mastered and we have good understanding of the painterly qualities and loosening up, we can really start to get into some of the play of gesture and more expression that we see from Morisot here. So lovely study, and a lovely overall portraitist and draftswoman of contemporary French culture in the middle 19th and late 19th century.